Hey everybody, Jeff Mucklin here with the Nurture Nature Center, and this is Science at Home. And in this week's video, I'm going to be bringing you a really sweet treat because the topic is actually about chocolate, a food that has had such a large impact on our culture and society that there are holidays that have become synonymous with the trading of chocolate. I'm thinking specifically of Halloween, Valentine's Day, and Easter. The most important ingredient in chocolate is cocoa, which comes from the plant Theobroma cacao, which is native to Central and South America. The history of chocolate is a long one, and it dates back thousands of years ago to the ancient Olmec civilization. We don't know a lot about the Olmecs, but they are widely known for constructing these giant stone heads. As early as 1500 BC, that's about 3,500 years ago, the ancient Olmecs were eating cocoa. We know this because archaeologists have found pottery at Olmec sites that contain traces of theobromine, which is found in large quantities in cocoa. Other ancient Central and South American civilizations used cocoa as well. For example, Mayan pottery has been found that contains traces of theobromine, and we now know that the Mayans were actually cultivating the cocoa plant to make chocolatey drinks from it. And they preferred to serve this drink in a frothy state, typically by pouring it from a vessel held up high into a container closer to the ground. And this would agitate the drink and make it very bubbly and frothy. Europeans were entirely unaware of chocolate, or cocoa for that matter, until they learned of the Americas. Hernan Cortez might have been the first European to learn of chocolate when he saw it in the Aztec court of Montezuma in 1519. From there, it spread mostly through the nobility within Europe. But in 1606, an Italian explorer independently learned of chocolate from the Maya. The French learned about chocolate from the Spanish in 1615. In 1646, Germans traveling in Italy brought the recipe back to Germany. And in 1650, the English learned of chocolate from the French. And the first colonial American chocolate factory opened in 1765. Somewhat surprisingly, the Swiss, who are now famous today for the fine chocolates that they produce, didn't actually start making chocolate until 1819. You might be wondering at this point how a modern milk chocolate bar is made, and how it might differ from, say, a dark chocolate bar, or how that might be different from powdered hot chocolate mix. The first step in making just about any kind of chocolate is to roast the cocoa beans. After the beans are roasted, they are cracked and winnowed, and the cocoa nibs are extracted. These are cocoa nibs, and this is chocolate in its raw and most natural form. In the next step, the cocoa nibs are ground and pulverized. I ground and pulverized some myself using this pestle and mortar, and the heat of pulverization turns the cocoa nibs into chocolate liquor. The next step is very important for producing different kinds of chocolate. We take our chocolate liquor and we put it in a hydraulic press, and this squeezes out and separates two of the components of our natural chocolate nibs or natural chocolate liquor. And what we get from this hydraulic press is cocoa butter and cocoa powder. Cocoa powder is what contains the actual cocoa. There is no chocolate, there is no cocoa in cocoa butter. This is just the natural fats and oils that are found in the cocoa bean. Now that we've separated the cocoa butter from the cocoa powder, we can add these back together in different ratios to produce different kinds of chocolate. But we need to consider two more ingredients. If we want to make milk chocolate, then we're going to need milk powder. And for most different kinds of chocolate, we're also going to be adding some additional sugar. But if we combine these four ingredients, the cocoa butter, the cocoa powder, the powdered milk, and the sugar, in various ways, we can produce all manner of different kinds of chocolate. Let's say you wanted to make a white chocolate bar. Well, to make a white chocolate bar, you would need to add together 50% sugar, 30% cocoa butter, and around 20% powdered milk. How would you make a milk chocolate bar, which is America's favorite way to consume chocolate? Well, to make a milk chocolate bar, you would need to add about 10% cocoa powder, 15% cocoa butter, 25% milk powder, and 50% sugar. Now, it kind of depends on the recipe, but to make a hot chocolate mix, you're going to add some amount of cocoa powder, powdered milk, and sugar. An unsweetened baking bar is 50% cocoa powder and 50% cocoa butter. And finally, for you chocolate lovers out there, how about a dark chocolate bar? This is a 90% cocoa dark chocolate bar, which means that 90% of this is cocoa powder, with 10% of the ingredients being a mix of cocoa butter and sugar. Now, one thing you might have noticed here is that to make chocolate, you have to bring in ingredients from around the world. So, for example, those cocoa beans, they come from cocoa plants that are grown in tropical regions of the world. Most of the world's cocoa is grown in Africa. A large fraction of it still comes from Central America and South America. But there are other ingredients, too, that we need to consider. How about that sugar? Sugar cane is grown in tropical regions as well. So here's some sugar cane that I've been growing. It's not ready to be harvested yet, but I'm told that when this is big enough, you can actually cut into it and suck the sap right from it. It's actually very sweet, even in its raw form. It's supposed to be very delicious. But a large amount of sugar cane is grown in Brazil. That's the world's leading producer of sugar and sugar cane today. And then there's also that milk powder, right? Milk comes mostly from cows, and cows, livestock like that, are raised all around the world. But most of the milk used to make the milk powder, used to make chocolate, comes from either the United States or from Europe. The map behind me shows major shipping routes around the world, and this is how most of the ingredients needed to make most different kinds of food, including chocolate, are transported from where those ingredients are grown, to where they are processed, to where they are finally transported to market, where they are purchased and consumed. And a lot of these ships are burning, bunker fuel, which is a very viscous, very heavily polluting form of fossil fuels. And the negative environmental impact does not end there. To grow chocolate, you have to cut down native forest and grow cocoa trees. In this map, we're seeing deforestation, and areas in purple are places where trees were cut down and then new trees were planted. Sadly, many of the workers who harvest cocoa beans are not paid a fair wage for their work. If we look at the share of profits from cocoa, we see that growers receive the smallest percentage of the money, and much of the cocoa that we enjoy is grown in the poorest parts of the world. So providing cocoa growers with a fair cut of the pay would go a long way towards improving living standards in these regions. Be sure to buy fair trade cocoa by looking for these logos. Better forest management practices can reduce the impact of growing cocoa, and demanding fair trade chocolate can improve living standards around the world. I promised something sweet at the start of the video, and because in this week's video I'm actually going to be sharing with you a recipe to make a chocolatey drink that is inspired by the way that the Maya would have consumed chocolate. Atole is a cornmeal-based beverage, and you add chocolate to it. And the chocolate that I used was a whole bar of this chili-spiced dark chocolate. I've chilled my chocolate mix, and I'm now ready to froth it up, similar to the way that the Mayans would have. All right, that looks pretty good. Let's try it. Absolutely delicious. Chocolate is an important part of our lives. It's been a part of Western culture for hundreds of years and part of Mesoamerican culture for thousands of years. Thank you for sharing your time with me, and I'll see you next time.